Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to talk about my top 12 wide receiver rankings for fantasy football in 2021, post the 2021 NFL Draft. We're going to be breaking down every single wide receiver inside of the top 12 and talk about why I have them ranked at each and every single spot. If you guys want to see my running back rankings, I ended up posting that yesterday. So after this video, check that out as well. Now, just like with the running back video, there are going to be people that disagree with each and every single ranking, and that is a-okay, because the top 12 at the wide receiver position are not going to be the same for everyone. Everyone's going to think a little bit differently, and that is okay, obviously. So down below in the comment section, before we get into it, if you want, leave your top 12 wide receiver rankings, and we can see what's different between mine and yours in the comment section. I'd love to talk to you guys. While you're down there in the comment section, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are new. I post content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, my number one wide receiver is basically everyone's number one wide receiver for this season, and that's Davante Adams, wide receiver of the Green Bay Packers. Now, obviously, when it comes to Davante Adams, there are some question marks, and they rely in the quarterback room in Green Bay. Right now, as I'm recording this, and even if you're watching this in August, we may not even know what is going to happen with Aaron Rodgers. Now, originally, I kind of just assumed that Aaron Rodgers was going to be the guy in Green Bay, and then more stuff kept coming out, more and more is piling up, and I'm officially kind of worried. They're bringing in other quarterbacks now because they're saying Jordan Love just isn't cracking it. He's not doing it yet. He's not good enough yet. He's not ready yet. And that would be full-on fucking Mayday panic mode to the maximum if Aaron Jones was gone for Davante Adams. And by Aaron Jones, I mean Aaron Rodgers. But there's also like a pretty high chance that Aaron Rodgers ends up staying as a Green Bay Packer. Davante Adams yesterday came out and said that he would start to rethink things if Rodgers was gone. So does that mean Davante Adams is going to get traded? Who knows? We're assuming right now that Rodgers is a Packer and that Adams is going to be a Packer for this video, for the sake of this video, because otherwise we're going to deep dive into some conspiracy theories, and we're just going to be talking fucking nonsense for like an hour. So, in 14 games last year, Adams was the wide receiver 1 in PPR, 1 in half PPR, as well as the wide receiver 1 in standard, averaging 25.6 PPR points per game, 21.5 half PPR points per game, and 17.4 standard points per game. From points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 1 in every single scoring format, full PPR, half PPR, as well as in standard. When Davante Adams is healthy, this guy is super safe every single week. The Green Bay Packers do not draft a skill player inside of the first round yet. Again, Davante Adams, sure, he will have competition from the other wide receivers around him, but he is going to be getting the lion share of the targets inside of this offense. Last year, ranked 4th in targets in the NFL with 149, meaning he was getting 10.6 targets per game, 4th highest in the NFL. He had a grand total of 115 receptions of those 149 targets, 2nd highest in the NFL for 1,374 receiving yards, 4th highest in the NFL, and 18th highest, or 18 total touchdowns, which was number 1 highest at the wide receiver position. So this guy is dominant in all aspects of the game. He's going to score the touchdowns. He's going to catch all the fucking balls. He's going to get a million targets, and he is going to get 7 zillion yards. Every single season, this is what happens with Davante Adams, as long as the guy is able to stay healthy. Now, that is kind of another question mark when it comes to Davante Adams, because he's really never played a full season. He typically gets turf toe and is out for like 2 games, but at the end of the day, if you just bake that into the equation, the guy's still going to be the wide receiver 1 at the end of the season, even if he misses like 3 games. So I think that Davante Adams should be relatively safe going into the 2021 NFL season. Now, if you're going into the mindset that guys never repeat, typically, the wide receiver 1 typically doesn't finish as the wide receiver 1 next year. Same thing goes with running backs, tight ends, and quarterbacks. It's very hard to repeat, especially at the running back and wide receiver position. And Davante Adams, if you're looking to fade him, you're looking to be like, you know what, maybe he's not going to repeat. I want to go with the second best guy. I think he could be the best, which is a understandable strategy because, again, it's hard to repeat back-to-back Michael Jordan 96-97 with wide receiver 1 finishes. Then your option would be my number 2 guy, Stefon Diggs, wide receiver of the Buffalo Bills. Now, going into last year, I was a guy that was like, dude, Stefon Diggs, He's going in there. It's his first year with Josh Allen. We haven't seen Josh Allen really put it all together. Now, I was a fan of Josh Allen going into last year, but I didn't think he'd be this good. And then Stefon Diggs is there. Stefon Diggs finishes as the wide receiver 3 in PPR, 3.5 PPR, and wide receiver 3 in standard, playing in all 16 games last season. Averaged 20.5 PPR points per game, 16.6 half PPR points per game, and 12.6 standard points per game. Meaning from a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 3 in PPR, 3.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 4 in standard. This Buffalo Bills offense last year was running super high octane. They're throwing the ball left and right, and they're just storming their way up the field. It seemed like no defense could figure out how to stop them. My Miami Dolphins, who I thought had a chance in that game, they take out Josh Allen after he just bent us over a table and inserted his cock raw style into my defense. Then Matt Barkley came in, did the exact same thing. Stefon Diggs was dancing on my grave, literally on the sideline, flossing on us because the guy just dominated us. He is so fucking good. 168 targets last year. Number 1 highest at the wide receiver position. 127 receptions, also number 1 at the wide receiver position. 1,500 receiving yards, number 1 at wide receiver. The only position, or the only kind of category of stats that he was kind of low in was touchdowns, with just 8, 13th highest at the wide receiver position, just 8 touchdowns. And that looks bad compared to his other stats. That's just how good the Buffalo Bills are, how good Josh Allen is, and how good Stefon Diggs and Josh Allen's connection are in the NFL. This is just very simple in my opinion. Stefon Diggs was really good in Minnesota, was really good last year in Buffalo, and maybe Josh Allen takes an even further step up, which would be kind of hard because he was really good last year, was in the MVP conversation early on in the season. Maybe he steps up even further and Stefon Diggs goes balls deep into defenses. I think that Diggs is very reliable as a wide receiver too, and this Buffalo team should return to form in 2021, so I like Diggs as my wide receiver number 2. At number 3, we have Tyreek the Freak Hill, wide receiver out of the Kansas City Chiefs. In 15 games last year, Tyreek Hill finished as wide receiver 2 in PPR, 2.5 PPR, as well as wide receiver number 2 in standard, averaging 21.9 PPR points per game, 19 half PPR points per game, and 16.1 standard points per game, meaning from a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 2 in all of those categories. And why is Tyreek Hill going to be good again? You want to know why? Because the Kansas City Chiefs offense is unstoppable unless you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because they locked them up like Kodak Black was locked up a couple of months ago. It was unfucking real how much this defense just ate up Mr. Patrick Mahomes, but they rebuilt the whole offensive line somehow in free agency, in the draft, and Tyreek Hill is going to be just as good as he always is. Mahomes is not going to lose a step. This offense is still going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. Tyreek Hill's speed is unmatched in the NFL. No DBs can really guard this guy, and it's just going to be domination yet again in 2021. Last year, having 134 receptions, 9th highest at the wide receiver position, 87 receptions, 15th highest at the wide receiver position, but guess what? It doesn't matter because he had 1,276 receiving yards, 7th highest at wide receiver, and 17 total touchdowns, 2nd highest at the wide receiver position. If Patrick Mahomes ends up staying healthy, Tyreek Hill is going to be a menace to defenses. Every single game, it is so hard to cover Tyreek Hill. Now, in the past, the knock against Mr. Tyreek Hill was that he wasn't ultra consistent, that, you know, some games he would be super consistent, and then the next week the guy ends up shitting the bed. But based upon last year, he was really consistent, only falling outside of the top 30 like 2 or 3 total times. He was ultra safe, which was something that was, again, something that a lot of people didn't like about him, that he was kind of inconsistent. He showed his consistency in 2020, and again, I just feel hard-pressed to think that Tyreek Hill wouldn't finish as a top 3 wide receiver as long as Patrick Mahomes stays healthy. At number 4, this is where it starts to get a little bit spicy. The 1, 2, 3 fucking combo at the beginning of the game, the 3-piece combo of the wide receivers early on. It's a little bit obvious. I think pretty much everyone has those guys inside their top 3. But at number 4, I'm getting a little bit spicy, and we're going with A.J. Brown, wide receiver of the Tennessee Titans. In the 2021 NFL Draft, the Titans saw these wide receivers available, and they curled up and took a fucking nap on their Tempur-Pedic mattress. A.J. Brown is going to get fed force-fed The Rock, literally. He's going to eat so many footballs that he's going to come out looking like Eddie Lacy. That's how many times this guy is going to get thrown the ball. And last year, even with Corey Davis there, and Corey Davis became really good last year. He did. He was not the Corey Davis of the past. He had 106 targets, 30th most at the wide receiver position for 70 total receptions, a grand total of 1,073 receiving yards, and 11 total touchdowns. And now, the only other wide receiver that was there, taking away his targets, is gone. Derrick Henry is not a pass-catching running back. He is not. He's working on it in the offseason, but I'll believe it when I can see it with my own two eyes, because I do not think that Derrick Henry will ever be a pass-catching running back in the NFL. So the door is wide open for A.J. Brown to take what he did last year and shove it right up your candy ass, fucking Dwayne The Rock Johnson style, and become a top 5 wide receiver in 14 games last year. Finishes wide receiver 14 in PPR, 12.5 PPR, wide receiver number 10 in standard, averaging 17.2 PPR points per game, 14.8 half PPR points per game, and 12.2 standard points per game, meaning on a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver number 7 in PPR, 5.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 6 in standard. If this guy is fed The Rock and is able to stay healthy, you better believe he has top 5 potential. The Tennessee Titans aren't necessarily just a jam the ball down your throat offense. They still have Ryan Tannehill and Mr. A.J. Brown, and I am feeling like he's going to get a Davante Adams-esque level feeding in 2021. I think that A.J. Brown is better than all these DBs. He was a monster last year, and I just think that with Corey Davis gone, with Jonnu Smith gone, the door is just so wide open. More wide open than, fuck, I forgot what the chick's name was. Maybe her name's Julia Ann in Nalen Palin. Her legs were wide open. This offense is wide open to be given the ball to Mr. A.J. Brown in 2021. At the 5th overall wide receiver spot, we got D-Hop, wide receiver of the Arizona Cardinals. The guy who took Houston. Man, I feel bad for Houston fans because he didn't even do anything. Bill O'Brien screwed over Houston, and now they're sitting there sad because their team is fucking awful, and DeAndre Hopkins is amazing in Arizona. He was another guy, just like with Diggs going into last year, that I was a little bit worried about. I was thinking, you know what, DeAndre Hopkins is not going to be able to do it year one in a COVID offseason, be able to do it with Kyler Murray, and I just feel like a dumbass for thinking about that for Diggs as well as for DeAndre Hopkins, because this guy was wide receiver 4 in PPR last year, 5.5 PPR, and wide receiver 9 in standard, playing in all 16 games, averaging 18 PPR points per game, 14.4 half PPR points per game, and 10.8 standard points per game, meaning from a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 5 in PPR, 8.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 11 in standard. This Cardinals offense, the air raid offense of Cliff Kingsbury, is sick nasty with Mr. DeAndre Hopkins. Why? Because the guy's always open. And if he's not open, in the Bills case, you saw what happened. Shout out to you Bills fans. That was fucking crazy. When Kyler ran up like the short guy he is, he's like 5 feet tall, can't even see over the offensive line, chucks it 60 yards, Kobe, and DeAndre Hopkins comes up, rises, just in the middle. It was like a commercial or like a movie or something. Threw like 4 dudes around him. Psych! Just grabs the ball. That was beautiful. This guy's hands are made of Elmer's glue. 160 targets, second highest at the wide receiver position for 115 receptions, second highest at the wide receiver position for 1,407 receiving yards, second highest at wide receiver, and 6 total touchdowns. Now, it's hard to project touchdowns at the wide receiver position or at any position besides quarterback because it is so random. It really is. Except for like Julio Jones, because you know that guy's just going to score like 3 touchdowns because for some reason that guy is allergic to scoring touchdowns. But DeAndre Hopkins has not been one of those guys who's allergic to scoring the fucking football. DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona was a sight to behold, and I think it will be yet again in 2021 with no new weapons around him. There's going to be some new guys there to take away some DBs to make it so DeAndre Hopkins will be even more open in 2021. I would feel foolish ranking him outside of the top 5, so that's where he lands at wide receiver number 5 in my rankings. At number 6, we're about halfway through the video. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below because not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. At number 6, we got my guy Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons. In 15 games last year, wide receiver 5 in PPR, 4.5 PPR, and 4 in standard on a Falcons offense that looked completely and utterly limp dick, averaging 17.1 PPR points per game, 14.4 half PPR points per game, and 11.6 standard points per game, meaning from a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 9 in PPR, 8.5 PPR, and wide receiver 9 in standard. So Calvin Ridley, even without Julio Jones, even with the offense not looking very hot, he still succeeds. Now, what's the difference between that offense and this offense? Obviously, we should be seeing a healthy Julio Jones, and we will have Kyle Pitts in this offense, but it's not, in my opinion, one of those where there's too many mouths to feed. All that bullshit. I don't believe that because I think that Calvin Ridley is going to hold his own in this offense. Now, that is keeping him outside of the top 5, but he's right there at number 6. Peeking his fucking head out to become a top 5 wide receiver yet again in 2021, averaging 143 targets last season, 9.5 per game, 7th highest at the wide receiver position, 90 total receptions, 11th highest for a grand total of 1,374 receiving yards, 4th highest at the wide receiver position, and 9 total touchdowns, 9th most at the wide receiver position. Again, this Atlanta Falcons team, I think, is going to look better than last year. And the defense probably isn't going to be good again, which means very good things for the wide receivers because they're going to be throwing the ball late into these games. And Calvin Ridley is going to be more involved than ever, even though he was super involved last season. I think that the player, Calvin Ridley himself, is very good. And the fact that he doesn't have necessarily a touchdown hog, because Julio Jones ate that. Maybe Kyle Pitts ends up doing that. But rookie tight ends never really do amazing the rookie year, but maybe Kyle Pitts is, the transcendent tight end because he kind of is. I mean, people are comparing this guy to Calvin Johnson, Megatron. I've never heard someone call a tight end Calvin Johnson. That's just such a high level of regard for a player. So maybe that, sucks away some touchdowns from Calvin Ridley, but I still think he should be pretty solid in 2021. At number 7, we got Double J, Justin Jefferson, wide receiver of the Minnesota Vikings. 6'1", 202 pounds. Justin Jefferson last year took my expectations and threw them out the window because I thought Justin Jefferson, I thought it would take a little bit of time. I thought this Vikings offense wasn't going to be the greatest. And Justin Jefferson just told me to go fuck myself, basically, because he went to town. He went to Pound Town on these defenses. 16 games, wide receiver 6 in PPR, 6.5 PPR, and 6 in standard, averaging 17.1 PPR points per game, 14.4 half PPR points per game, and 11.6 standard points per game, meaning from a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 9 in PPR, 8.5 PPR, and wide receiver 9 in standard. So, think about it real quick. He didn't even really start off that hot. His first 2 games, he was barely getting any targets. And then he basically, he played 16 games, but he really played 14. Because after week 2, week 3 up against Tennessee, up against Malcolm Butler, the guy who stole the Super Bowl from Seattle, this man had 7 catches for 175 yards, a touchdown, and was wide receiver 2 on the week. Which is just insane. Just insane. Went from being a guy that I was not really high on the radar about. I was thinking Minnesota, not going to be all that great. He's not going to be all that good. And then, boom, he just falcon punches my fucking expectations of the guy. 125 targets last season, 16th highest at the wide receiver position for 88 receptions, 7 total touchdowns, and 1,400 receiving yards, 3rd highest at the wide receiver position. Now, the offense still has Mr. You Like That Kirk Cousins, and some people won't be liking that for fantasy football purposes, but at the end of the day, it's not too worrisome. The Vikings wanted to draft a new quarterback. They wanted Fields, but they didn't end up getting him. They draft new offensive line, and I think that the Minnesota Vikings are going to be pretty solid on offense again, and Justin Jefferson should be able to have quite the good season, but not as good of a season as the 6 other fellers ahead of him. At number 8, we have Michael Thomas. Now, this is a man that, frankly, I have no idea where to rank. I mean, I do have an idea. It's number 8, but it's weird. It's weird because last year, Michael Thomas was easily the wide receiver 1. You're thinking, this guy in 2019 was putting up video game numbers. Video game numbers. 186 targets, 149 receptions, 1,700 yards, 9 total touchdowns. Video game numbers in 2019. Then in 2020, deals with injuries, and then should be able to come back, but then, like, we're hearing in practice, he's, like, uproaring. He's starting a straight-up uproar up against the coaches, the players, all this shit. He doesn't want to play. That's what we're hearing again. I don't know if that's even true. If I'm being honest with you, I have no idea if that's true, but that's what we are hearing. And then I'm thinking, when is he going to come back? Then he comes back, and he isn't really all that good. 55 targets last year, 40 receptions, 438 receiving yards, 0 touchdowns, wide receiver 93 in PPR, 97.5 PPR, 102 in standard in 7 games. He was wide receiver 41 in PPR from a points per game perspective, 48.5 PPR, and 63 in standard. So he wasn't really getting it done at all, even in a points per game standpoint. So what does it mean now with famous Jameis, the W Eater Winston under center? Now, I'm not all that worried about Jameis Winston. I think that even if Jameis throws 7,000 interceptions again, it won't matter because of that gunslinger mentality. He had Evans and Godwin as top 10 guys. Those guys were premier wide receivers in 2019 because of Jameis Winston, and Michael Thomas should be a premier top 10 wide receiver because of Jameis Winston. Now, Jameis isn't necessarily the biggest fan of those slants that the slant god himself, Michael Thomas, runs, but I think that Jameis will realize that's the best wide receiver on the field. I see him. I'm going to throw him the ball, and he's used to throwing the Saints jerseys, especially in Tampa Bay, so you should be fine with Monsieur Michael Thomas in 2021. I understand that a lot of people will feel like this guy scarred them heavily, that they don't want to draft him in 2021, and I understand that, but don't think that way, because if you just go ahead and think that way, then you're not going to want to draft Zeke, you're not going to want to draft Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey. Just throw last year out the window. Sure, you can bring up the stats, but you gotta understand that these projections are not just based on last year. They're based on what I saw last year and what I've seen in the past and what I believe it will be in the present. And I think the present is gonna be something nice that Santa Claus left under the tree. Michael Thomas should be a top 10 wide receiver and return to form in 2021. Let me know down below in the comment section, actually, if you haven't commented already, what do you guys think about Michael Thomas? Because he is definitely a player that a lot of people hate because he thinks he's all that and he just runs slants all the time, which he doesn't actually do. He has a much more diverse skill tree, not skill tree, this isn't a fucking video game, but like wide receiver tree of routes that he runs. He's not just the slant guy, even though that's what we call him because it's funny. At number 9, we have Keenan Allen, wide receiver of the Los Angeles Chargers. What would be known as the silkiest feet in the NFL, the best route runner in the NFL, in my opinion. Keenan Allen in 14 games last year finished as wide receiver 14 in PPR, as well as in half PPR, and wide receiver 18 in standard, averaging 17.5 PPR points per game, 13.9 half PPR points per game, and 10.4 standard points per game, meaning from a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 6 in PPR, 11 in half PPR, and wide receiver number 14 in standard. This 6'2", 206-pound king put on some numbers with Justin Herbert, the pervert. What's funny is if Herbert didn't play last year and Tyrod was playing the whole time, I'd be talking about maybe how Keenan Allen's washed or something, because Tyrod looked terrible in the first game. If you guys remember, Tyrod didn't do anything good at all, and then once Herbert got in, Keenan Allen was unleashed. Literally, this guy was dominant with Justin Herbert. This whole offense opened up with Justin Herbert, and I think Keenan Allen is going to keep getting fed in 2021. Justin Herbert had a great rookie season. Imagine if he takes that next step in 2021 and gets even better. 147 targets for Mr. Keenan Allen, 5th highest at the wide receiver position. 100 receptions, 5th highest at the wide receiver position. 992 receiving yards, 16th at the wide receiver position, and 8 total touchdowns, 13th highest at the wide receiver position. I think this Chargers offense made all the right moves in the draft. It really just seems like Justin Herbert's going to have all the time back there behind this offensive line that they built from scratch. Justin Herbert last year is running away, scared as fuck because his offensive line is folding like a table in Buffalo. Now they're going to build a wall in front of this guy, and Keenan Allen will get open. There's really no other wide receiver options there. I mean, Mike Williams will have those games where he has a couple good games, right? He always does, and that's why we always fall into the trap of drafting him, which is funny because we'll probably end up drafting him again this year. I'll probably talk myself into him because of how good Herbert is, but Keenan Allen is legit, obviously. He's been in the league for a while. He's proved it to me. 14 games last year, very good, and I think that in another year with Herbert, with a better head coach, the head coaching change is also something to talk about because Anthony Lynn is a certified fucking idiot. This guy does not know how to run a offense. I'm surprised he was even a head coach for so long because this guy couldn't even run a kid's fucking, what is that called? Flag football team. Couldn't even run that because the guy has no idea how to call timeouts, no idea what he is doing. But now, with a new head coach, this is going to be much better for Keenan Allen, and I expect the Chargers to be very solid in 2021. Next up, we got DK Metcalf, wide receiver of the Seattle Seahawks, the guy who came in 9th at the Tokyo Olympics, I believe is where they're doing it, the trials. Congrats to DK. All that shows you is that these track guys that are skinny can run faster than DK Metcalf, who is like double their size. Who cares? DK Metcalf is a freak athlete, but my worrisome to why he's at number 10 is because, man, Seattle could just revert to trying to run the ball again, like a bunch of times, like they were trying to do at the end of the season. Like, I don't know, like the let Russ cook movement seems like Pete Carroll does not like to see Russ cook. He would rather cook it up Chris Carson style. I mean, DK Metcalf's fast as fuck. He's huge. He's everything you would want in fantasy except for Pete Carroll's his head coach. And I like Pete Carroll, but he's not the best for the wide receivers or Russell Wilson. In 16 games, finishing as wide receiver 7 in PPR, 7.5 PPR, and 5 in standard, averaging 17 PPR points per game, 14.4 half PPR points per game, and 11.8 standard points per game from a points per game perspective. He was wide receiver 10 in PPR, 8.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 8 in standard. So to kind of put that into perspective a little bit, the first couple weeks of the season, he's dropping so many points. He was wide receiver 13. Week 1, wide receiver 12, week 2. Week 3, wide receiver 19, then wide receiver 26, then wide receiver 6. And then at the end of the season, when they're kind of not really letting Russ cook, wide receiver 41, week 13, wide receiver 19, week 14, week 15, wide receiver 48, week 16, wide receiver 36, week 17, wide receiver 78. So there was a clear change from the beginning of the season where this guy's scoring like 25 points a game potentially to the end of the season when they're trying to run the ball a little bit more. So that really does kind of scare me slightly away from DK Metcalf. Now, does that mean I think DK Metcalf is bad? No, but I don't love Pete Carroll, and I don't think enough people are really talking about this when they're ranking DK Metcalf super high. 129 targets last year, 14th highest at wide receiver, 83 receptions, 17th highest at the wide receiver position, 1,300 receiving yards, 6th highest, 10 total touchdowns, 7th highest. Should have had 11, but he was kind of putting the football backwards and someone fucking smacked it out of his hand. There's a bunch, if you guys are on TikTok, there's a trend, at least if you're on football TikTok, it's like in a song, the guy goes, DK dropped it, and it's just a compilation of DK dropping the ball where it's right in his hand. But again, you can't really slight the guy for that because he still had a great season. Even with a couple of stupid drops or mishandling of the football. But you have to understand that Lockett's going to get a lot of targets, even though I don't like Lockett, and that they're going to try to run the ball. So that's why he's my wide receiver 10. He may end up even being lower. If I'm being honest with you, by the time we're drafting in August, I may talk myself way lower into Metcalf. And a lot of people are going to draft him super high. Now, again, I don't think he's going to be a bust, but I think if you're drafting him to be a top 5 guy, you may be a little bit foolish. But maybe I'm wrong, and Pete Carroll returns to the way of letting Russ cook it up Stephen Curry style. At number 11, we have my main man, Allen Robinson, wide receiver of the Chicago Bears. This guy's putting up big numbers with quarterbacks the likes of Blake Bortles in the past. He's done it with 9-inch Nick Foles. He's done it with the MVP, the Nickelodeon most valuable player, kissing titties Mitchell Trubisky. He's going to do it this year with the Ginger Ninja, Andy Dalton potentially. And if not Andy Dalton, it's going to be Justin Fields, quarterback out of the Ohio State University. The Chicago Bears trade up in the NFL draft. They stick their fucking flag into the middle of the field, Baker style, and they say, you know what? We want Justin Fields. Allen Robinson, again, like I said, he has been so good with these dog water quarterbacks. So if Justin Fields is any bit better than that, Allen Robinson should be an easy top 12 wide receiver pick, in my opinion. Last year, finishing as wide receiver 9 in PPR, 11.5 PPR, and 12 in standard, playing in every single game last year, 16 games, averaging 16.4 PPR points per game, 13.2 half PPR points per game, 10.1 standard points per game. And from a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 13 in PPR, 15.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 17 in standard. Now, again, people talk about how he's on the Bears. Now, Andy Dalton isn't that good. Again, don't assume that Dalton's going to play more than like 3 to 5 games next year. I highly doubt he may not even be the starter week 1. I think Fields can end up being the starter. Regardless of the quarterback, though, he puts up big numbers, and he's not really a guy that gets hurt. Knock on wood, hopefully. Playing in 16 games, both in 2019 and 2020. 151 targets, third highest at the wide receiver position. He had 102 receptions, 1,200 receiving yards, 8th highest at the wide receiver position, and 6 total touchdowns. Now, I understand that I don't love Matt Nagy, and you probably don't either. The guy's not the greatest play caller, but at the end of the day, with Justin Fields under center, I just think things are going to get better in Chicago. And what I've seen out of Allen Robinson is that he's too good to be fading him outside of the top 12. So I'd be shocked to see anyone with him outside their top 12. And at number 12, we're getting a little spicy again. My wide receiver 12, my boy, Bobby Trees. It's Bobby, bitch. Shout out to Bobby Shmurda, who is now free. Robert Woods, wide receiver of the Los Angeles Rams. Now, I've talked about this guy so much, my knees hurt from sucking this guy's metaphorical cock in fantasy football. 6 feet tall, 201 pounds, 29 years old, the Bobby Trees. Last year, finishing as wide receiver 12 in PPR, 13.5 PPR, and wide receiver 13 in standard. In 16 games, averaging 15.3 PPR points per game, 12.5 half PPR points per game, 9.7 standard points per game. From a points per game perspective, was wide receiver 19 in full PPR, half PPR, as well as in standard. Now, what's different about the Rams? Everything. Stafford is now there. Now, I don't hate Goff. I actually think Goff is an okay quarterback, but Stafford is like going from having like an average 6-inch cock to being Nick Foles, and you got like a 12-incher down there. You got an anaconda down there, okay? That's the difference. Stafford he's a big dick player. He is. And he's going to be really good in 2021. And the NFL, those dirty motherfuckers. If you go onto the NFL Twitter, I even retweeted this at NotoriousFNTSY. They put up this graphic, the new Rams offense versus the Cardinals defense. They're showing off these Rams players, right? They're like Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Tutu Atwell, Deshaun Jackson, Cam Akers, and Robert Woods isn't on there. And I literally said, did Robert Woods fuck whoever the NFL Twitter manager is? Did he fuck his wife or something? Because that's what had to have happened. Why are people disrespecting Robert Woods? He's so good. He's great, as Tony the Tiger would say. 130 targets, 12th highest at the wide receiver position, 90 receptions, 935 receiving yards, and 8 total touchdowns. With Cooper Kupp there, with Tutu fucking Atwell. Who cares about Tutu Atwell? Who cares about Deshaun Jackson? Okay? Robert Woods is going to be good. I know some people don't like Stafford. I know some people won't like this Rams offense. They'll say it's going to be fraudulent, that Sean McVay is a fraud. I really believe that Woods is going to be having his best career season ever. I genuinely believe that. I think this is going to be the smash Robert Woods year. Last year, he was really good. And I told you guys he was going to be really good. But I think he's going to be even better. I really do with Stafford under center. So let me know. what you guys thought about my top 12 rankings. This video probably around 30 minutes long, I would say. Maybe slightly shorter, 35 minutes right now, but obviously I have to edit some stuff out. The video is going out in the midday because it's super late as I'm recording this, and I want to go to bed because I have an important meeting tomorrow morning that if something ends up working out with that, you'll hear about it. If not, I'm going to cry myself to sleep. So thank you guys all so much for watching. I love you guys from the deep down depths of my heart. Someone on my last video, I forgot who it was. I apologize. They said 20,000 by the end of the summer. That's the subscriber goal. No. I hope we hit 20,000, but we're shooting for higher. 30,000. Even though that's probably impossible, you know. I shoot for the fucking stars. Hit the moon, I think is what they say. Maybe, so we're shooting for 20,000, but the moon shot, the fucking cum shot, 30,000 subscribers. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I love you guys all deep down in my heart. Let me know if you liked today's video. I hope that you guys are having a great day. Today is Tuesday, as you guys are going to watch this. It's Taco Tuesday. I love tacos. I'm a big taco guy, but that has nothing to do with anything. Have a great rest of your guys' day. Make sure that you have a good day. As always, well, you're watching this in the middle of the day now, so hopefully you had a good morning. Have a good rest of your day. As always, stay safe. Good boy.